I've done a couple of videos now on our old friend, the Bigfoot, so I figured that it was about time to focus on his closest relative, the Yeti, or the Abominable Snowman. This guy may not have as many movies as the old Sasquatch, but there's still plenty to cover. But I can't promise that it's all going to be good. So let's do it. Let's head up into the snow-covered mountains and see what's up there. So, you know, Father's Day is coming up, and I used to make fun of my dad for being notoriously hard to buy a gift for, but it turns out that as a dad, I'm kind of the same way, apparently. But it looks like Ridge has found the way to my heart, and I guess it's in my pants, because Ridge has redefined the wallet. And if you're like me, and you kind of streamlined what you carried, this is the answer. I mean, like, look at this. It's got this unique, expandable design that can hold up to 12 cards in it. Plus, it has room for cash if that's something that people still carry. I actually had to go and get cash specifically just to make this video. I don't really carry cash, but it also has RFID protection, which is something that is very important to me, and it's available in over 30 colors. I've got the cool burnt titanium design here, but I also got this matching key case right here, which is pretty cool. Same color, same material, holds up to 6 keys. I only have 2. I don't have a lot of keys. And you right now can get up to 30% off your order when you buy the wallet and key case together as a set. And right now, with Father's Day coming up, it is a great time to let Dad know that you're thinking about what's in his wallet. That did not come out right, but he will love it because Ridge has over 3 million customers, 50,000 plus 5-star reviews, and you can test it out for 99 days. Not 90, 99. And you can get a full refund if it does not make you extremely happy. Plus, it comes with a lifetime warranty, so you can have some peace of mind. Grab it for your pops, get it for yourself, or just someone that you think is a pretty cool, rad dude. And right now, if you go to ridge.com/timelines, you can get up to 40% off through June 15th. All you have to do is go to the link in the description below, or just go to ridge.com/timelines and save that money. Number 10. Our first film on this list is an early entry as we go back to 1977 for Snow Beast, which was actually a made-for-TV movie that aired on NBC. It starts off immediately with a woman being attacked by a creature with white furry paws. There's then a resort about to have its big 50th anniversary, and it's run by Juno. And, big resort, event coming up, monster on the loose. I wonder if someone's gonna know about the Yeti and warn them, but they're gonna refuse to close it because of tourism. Buford Pusser Mark II shows up, and yep, Tony here, who is Carrie's grandson, works for her and tries to tell her about something dangerous and wants to report it to the authorities, but she doesn't want to because they make too much money on the carnival. And this one was directed by Herb Wallerstein, who had a pretty long career with directing, but mostly just TV or TV movies. He did do some assistant director work on quite a few features in the 50s and 60s, though. And unlike Jaws, though, in this movie, our heroes discuss their issues while soaking in a nice hot bath, which I personally think that film was lacking. Like, Jaws is my all-time favorite movie, but just think how much better it would have been with Richard Dreyfuss and Roy Schneider discussing great whites in a steamy tub. They don't refer to the creature as a Yeti or Abominable Snowman, and actually just call it a Bigfoot. And yep, there's a scene where they bring in a bear and say it's responsible so they can continue their festivities. So the Jaws ripoff stuff is pretty blatant, and for the most part, it's pretty dull. And you don't get a half-decent look at the creature until the last few minutes, and it's clearly a Yeti with white fur, but it never gets that full-on reveal. I'm gonna guess because the suit looked cheap. Number 9. Next up, from 2013, we're going to check out Deadly Descent, the Abominable Snowman. It begins with a glimpse of a pretty big dude right here, and the guy with the sex bot from Jason X is headed up on the mountain, and he encounters a monster, so his sister goes on the hunt for him, while the big dude attacks some random in the snow. There's a Highlander here, just doing some subtle acting.
Listen, soldier boy. I got enough problems.
Not friends with my...
And this whole squad goes looking for Brian, where they have to face down an avalanche, which of course strands them atop the mountain. And like Snow Beast, this was also a made-for-TV flick, but of course, it was for sci-fi. And it was by Finnish director Marco Macalasco, who kind of ping-pongs between doing this kind of movie for sci-fi and direct-to-video things, and also doing a whole lot of music videos for Finnish bands. The creature is bigger than most Yeti are portrayed and has black fur instead of the expected white. And that might be because even though this is called Deadly Descent, the Abominable Snowman, and was also just called Yeti on some releases, I guess it was also entitled simply Deadly Descent, and I guess this possibly was not really meant to be a Yeti in the first place. And yeah, like most sci-fi movies, it's a bit of the same old, and the CGI is really iffy, but it's not terrible or anything. Number 8. Moving on now to 2020 with a confusing one called Abominable. And it's confusing because there's a 2006 movie with that title that's just about Bigfoot and not the Yeti, but there's also a 2019 animated film called that as well. But this is different than those and has a rescue team arriving at a research lab where the previous crew left a recording about encountering something in the mountains. And yep, pretty soon there's a big white furred creature hunting them down and killing them as they wander through the woods. We get to see the big fella fairly early on, and it's a fine enough costume, I suppose, and they're on the hunt for something called the Yeti plant, which can rapidly heal people from, I guess, anything. Like they say, it will not only cure cancer, but stops cells from dying, so it can make people immortal. And then there's just a whole bunch of walking around the woods. But there are some fun practical gore effects happening here, so it at least has that going for it. But it's mostly pretty run-of-the-mill until they decide to throw in some wild time anomaly stuff for no reason and state that everything in the area is prehistoric. So like the Yeti plant has preserved all of the life of the zone for millions of years. And Bommy is aware of it, so when he gets lumped up, he just rubs some of that magic plant on his wounds, and presto, he's healed up. So this was directed by Jamal Burden, who has only directed 3 movies so far, and this is the second one I've covered since he made Elves, which showed up on my worst Christmas list. And I mean the 2017 Elves, not the silly 89 one. And whereas this one is not quite as hard to get through as that one, it's also not as ridiculous either, so it doesn't even fall into that I'm enjoying this because of how bad it is category. It's really just people walking around in the snow for an hour and a half, and the occasional cool gore gag. But those are perhaps a little too few and far between. Number 7. Get ready for deja vu because our next film is Snow Beast from 2011. Instead of opening on a skier, this has a snowboarder, but like the woman at the beginning of the 70s version, this guy is also attacked by a Yeti. Superman's dad is here, and he and his daughter take a trip up to Canada on a research expedition, and then, hey, Jason London is here. But this isn't a sci-fi film, so go figure. I thought that he was like in some sort of exclusive contract with them. So we get to see the monster suit a hell of a lot earlier here, and it's pretty cool, and does resemble what little we get to see of the original one. And IMDb says that it's supposedly the same suit, but I kind of have my doubts about that. It looks rather modern as compared to the bits we saw before. There's family drama because Teen Emmy is boy crazy, and even though it's billed as a remake, it's really not. None of the Jaws-oriented stuff is present, and the whole resort storyline is absent. It's just this small research team up there in a pretty solitary cabin, fairly standard setup for this sort of thing. And yeah, they are really not shy about showing off that suit. And the more they show it, the goofier it looks. Like you start to realize the benefit of keeping off screen so much in the first one. But my favorite thing about the monster here is just how ineffective it seems to be. There's several times where it's like feet away from someone, and they manage to get away. And it's funny because this one isn't for the Sci-Fi Channel, but it sure as hell feels like it is. It has that same, it's fine, but it doesn't do anything you don't expect kind of energy going for it. Number 6. Speaking of Sci-Fi Channel movies, here's another one from 2011, and it's Rage of the Yeti. And this one kicks things off in the Arctic with a research team, and even though it's hard to see her through all this snow gear, there's no mistaking the voice of the Witchblade, Yancey Butler. They're besieged by some white-furred monsters with effects that are basically comparable to those from Deadly Descent, and there's a couple of treasure hunters, including a Baywatch dude, and they're hired to find the team. The squad looks more like a group of college interns than it does a treasure hunting team, but then David Hewlett pops in for some reason, and that reason is that he actually directed this one. Yep, it's one of only 3 movies that he directed. It's weird. He did a little indie comedy film, a sci-fi hacker movie, and this, a movie about Yetis. Pretty quickly, it just becomes familiar territory as they find the research team and have to fight off the elements and also some random assortments of pixels that, if you squint hard enough, will vaguely look like a Yeti. Now, I know that IMDb is not the most accurate source for budget information, but it has the price tag for this movie at $1.8 million, which is actually extremely high for a standard Sci-Fi Channel movie. In comparison, the original Sharknado movie only cost $1 million, and after that became a big phenomenon, and they made a sequel. The budget on that was only up to $1.5 million. So if that's right, then this movie cost more than that one. So either David Hewlett has an extra like $0.8 million in his pocket there, or someone paid a little too much for their VFX studio. There's lots of Yeti here, with them saying that there's at least 6 of them, and they're actually said to be Yeren, basically Chinese wild men, just like snow versions of them. The Yeren were what the furry creature from Big Trouble in Little China was meant to be, but these guys don't look anywhere as cool as that dude, and I have to say that this is pretty dull, both in the script and in how it looks, and I'm starting to think that Yeti movies are just pretty boring in general. Number 5. Our next entry is from 2008, and it's called Yeti, Curse of the Snow Demon. And it starts with a bunch of football players on a flight, and you know this guy is a football player because his name is Peyton Elway. And tragedy strikes as their plane hits a massive storm, and then has the gentlest crash landing that I've ever seen. They end up stranded in the Himalayas and have to try to survive, and eventually find a cave, but also come face to face with the Yeti, who is partially this dude in a suit, but sometimes is a CGI creation, and I'm not really sure why. Like, it looks like they had a full suit, and this isn't doing anything that a real guy can do, but for some reason, they went CGI anyway. The suit is pretty comparable to the others on this list, really no better or worse, and they send in a rescue team to try to find them, with a jump streeter and the girl from House of the Dead involved. And this is yet another Sci-Fi Channel film, since I guess they kind of have the market cornered on Yeti films at this point, and it's by Paul Ziller, who has made a ton of films for the network, including Beyond Loch Ness, which I featured on another list of cryptids, and he's also the guy who made the pretty cool slasher flick from 1988, Pledge Night, which most people remember as the video cover with the guy's hand holding a banana in the toilet. What's maybe of bigger note is it has a story credit for Mark Lester, the director of the original Firestarter and Schwarzenegger's Commando. It's basically one part that airplane crash movie Alive, with them trying to decide whether to eat their dead friends to survive, and well, one part every other movie on this list, because I have to tell you, we're more than halfway through here, and I'm not entirely sure if you jumbled up the titles that I could identify which one was which. Number 4. maybe we'll have a little more luck with an older movie. So let's go all the way back to 1974 and check out Shriek of the Mutilated. The opening gives us a slideshow talking about the Yeti as part of a lecture as a group of grad students are headed up on a field trip, but a former student overhears them talking about it and tells of his field trip from years ago, in which a Yeti killed all of the students except him and the professor.
It was precisely 7 years ago to the day, when I was a young, bright-eyed student just like you.
7 years ago, this guy was young and bright-eyed? Those were a damn hard 7 years. In a flashback, we see, not much. Can't really see anything here. And his professor is the same professor taking the students on this trip. So he's either up to something or just a real glutton for punishment. And that night, Spencer tries to kill his wife, who then electrocutes him. They head up to the island where the professor's kooky friend is, and he has this servant there named Laughing Crow, and Carl had previously encountered a Yeti in the woods, and the next day they all head out on the hunt. One of them is attacked early on, and oh boy, take a look at this guy. I should probably slow this down and get a good look at it, and yep, this is top line 1974 special effects right here. And the director here was Michael Findley, who did a number of low-budget sexploitation films in this time period, many of them softcore sex reels, but this was considered a turn towards more mainstream work, although everything he did after this would be of a more sexual nature. And his wife was actually Roberta Findlay, who had her own notorious career and made the weird, skeevy crime flick Tenement. So when members of their group go missing, they don't immediately just say, hey, remember that guy that told us the story of this professor taking a bunch of students up to the woods and they were all killed? Do you think that's happening here? Nah. Well, one thing is for sure, and that's that this one certainly can't be confused with any of the others, since the ending goes down a really odd road that I suppose possibly disqualifies it for this list a bit. And it's not a great movie. In fact, at one point, it was on some lists for the worst movies ever made. But I don't know, it is kind of entertaining. Number 3. Let's stay in that time period and check out 1975's Night of the Howling Beast, also known as The Werewolf and the Yeti, which jumps right in with an attack in the snow, and then we have Paul Naschy showing up, and he's playing a character named Waldemar. And if you don't know what that means, then you should know that Naschy headed up a long-running series of werewolf films in which he always played a character named Waldemar Daninsky, who was a lycanthrope, but was meant to be a different character in each one. Here, he's hired to lead up an expedition to find the Yeti, and he and a group head off into the mountains of Tibet, but Waldo gets separated from the rest of the group and winds up in a cave, which appears to be a shrine to Moloch, and is inhabited by several women who turn out to be werewolves, and he kills them, but not before being bitten. That night, under a full moon, he changes, and we're a third of the way into this thing, and there's not a Yeti in sight. He attacks them, and later his group is taken captive by a group of pirates who kill and torture them. Sylvia manages to escape and teams up with Daninsky to try to free everyone, and yep, we are now more than an hour into this and still no Yeti. But you know, most of the other Naschy wolf flicks were pretty tame, so it's kind of surprising to see a very heightened level of sex and violence here, since it's like triple what the earlier ones featured. But yet, with less than 10 minutes left in the movie, we finally get the Yeti that at least one of the titles promised, and he's kind of more Sasquatch than he is Snowman, but he's close enough, and I like the Naschy flicks. Like, yes, they can be slow at times, but this one has enough variation of weird goings-ons that it's never dull. Number 2. So that was Spain's take on the legend, but let's see how Italy handles it with 1977's Yeti, Giant of the 20th Century. And the opening theme song is like As close to O Fortuna as you can get without landing yourself a lawsuit. Rich jerky dude Morgan here hires his old friend Henry to head out on an expedition to find the Yeti, which is basically the start of every single one of these movies. And then there's this big chunk of ice that they found off an iceberg, and they thaw it out, revealing what seems to be a pair of giant feet, and they identify him as a Yeti. They also say that he's been on ice for millions of years, and Morgan wants to use it for his business, of course. And this fella's a lot bigger than any of the others that appeared on this list. And that's because this film was the Italians' answer to King Kong, which came out the previous year. They eventually thaw the monster out, but he wakes up cranky, mainly because he looks like a member of ZZ Top. It gets loose and starts attacking, and seriously, look at this guy. He's less a Yeti and more that one guy from Zombie Bloodbath. He winds up not being as violent as everyone thinks and takes a liking to Jane here, who was Emily in City of the Living Dead, and she figures out the way to the Yeti's good side, which is apparently rubbing his nipple, which, I am not lying, gets this reaction. When I first envisioned this channel, all those years ago, I wasn't sure I would ever say the phrase, "The girl then makes the massive Yeti's nipple erect." But there you go. Then everyone is all friendly, like their last name is Henderson or whatever, and he becomes an international sensation. And you remember that O Fortuna sounding song earlier? Well, there's also a disco version. The latter part of this movie is pretty much just King Kong, but I absolutely love the bit with the Yeti climbing down a building but kicking out all the windows in order to get a foothold. But I will never, ever be able to look at this dude's hairdo seriously. It also has one of my favorite moments, like this girl falls off of the building and plunges down about 20 stories, and just as she's about to go splat on the ground, he catches her in his hand, and she's nice and safe, but like, what's the difference between her hitting the pavement or his hand? It's not like his palm is one of those big safety inflatables or anything. She'd still be a mass of jelly and broken bones. It gets a bit slow here and there, but overall, it's fairly fun, and it's kind of weird to think about a Yeti movie basically being a kaiju film. Number 1. Our number 1 movie here is also the oldest one here, as we're going all the way back to 1957 with The Abominable Snowman from Hammer, so you know it's going to be good. We're in the Himalayas with Grand Moff Tarkin, and he's a former mountain climber there checking out some rare plants, but he then reveals to his wife that they're actually there to look for the Yeti, and are going climbing to find it. He teams up with Tom here and his group, and they head on up there. And John theorizes that the strands of evolution that spun off humans from the great apes also branched into a third line, the Yetis. At first they experience nothing but troubles as one of their own members gets stuck in one of their bear traps and arguments amongst themselves. But before long, there's something outside their tent antagonizing them. They kill it, but hear more in the distance, and this was actually the very first film that Peter Cushing did for Hammer. It wasn't the first release though, since The Curse of Frankenstein came out before this one, but they shot this one first. It was directed by Val Guest, who had also previously done the Quatermass films, and would go on to become one of the first Bond directors in a way, since he worked on part of the comedic 1967 take on Casino Royale. Meanwhile, check out this dummy drop. Maybe it's the black and white, and I don't know, but there's more atmosphere in 5 minutes of this one than there is in the whole rest of this list combined. And maybe it's because I saw this one like a dozen times on the Saturday morning classic movies back in the day, but when I think of Yeti movies, this is the one my mind conjures up. And they don't even really show the Yeti through a large portion of the movie, which is fine, since the teases they give work well with the tone of the film. And when they do finally arrive in the final moments, they give you just enough. And overall, this list may not have been the most exciting roster of movies, but this is a great way to finish things out. It's cool and claustrophobic and a great time. So there you have it, 10 movies about the Yeti. And yeah, most of these were not good. There was about 2 or 3 in here that I enjoyed watching, but for the most part, they were pretty dull. Duller than the Bigfoot movies. I thought a lot of the Bigfoot movies were just people wandering around the woods. Somehow wandering around in the snow is even more boring. But yeah, there was a couple on here that were still pretty fun. I mean, you can't beat that last one. Fantastic. If you've seen any of these, let me know. If you know of other Yeti movies that I didn't cover, let me know them down below in the comments. I'd like to hear those. Also, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like, hit subscribe if you're enjoying what you see on the channel. And if you think about it, go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. You can help support this channel like these guys do. I'd appreciate that. But I also appreciate you just watching the videos. And I'll see you very shortly for another great one. Thanks a lot, guys, and bye-bye.